So welcome to another instalment of Good Vibrations. It's one that promises to be quite fascinating. It's one that I've been looking forward to personally a lot because it's a subject area that I really want to get into, and it's a subject area that I've addressed a couple of times in some of my own talks and some of my own radio appearances. So very excited today to be chatting to Mr. Fritz Springmeier. How you doing, Fritz?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Great to have you on. Now, of course, you're the author of a very important book, which I've referenced a few times, and many other people have. The Illuminati Formula, used to create an undetectable, total, mind-controlled slave, which you wrote in conjunction with Cisco Wheeler. You've also written other books, including Bloodlines of the Illuminati, Deeper Insights into the Illuminati Formula. So what we're going to be talking about today is basically the very sinister and ugly and nasty world of mind control, trauma-based mind control, and specifically MK Ultra. So first off, people that might want to find out a bit about you, should they go to your Wikipedia entry? I noticed that it's far from complimentary. It kind of reeks of bias and ulterior motive. You're described as a conspiracy theorist, and then we have the strategic use of words such as claims and conjecture. And it seems the authorities and the establishment don't really like you very much.
Well, the Wikipedia article is full of distortions and outright lies. And one of their sources that they've gone to is they used yellow journalism articles as their substantiation. In other words, some news reporter comes along, fabricates a story, and because it gets put into print, it then is referenced as an authority about me.
There you go.
So, yeah, going to Wikipedia is an effort in futility if you want to learn about me. You can, the listeners are welcome to go to my website, pentracks.com. That's pentracks.com, pentracks.com. And I have a bio there. I've been pretty open about my life, and I've been open as an author to people contacting me. Every day I have people contact me and interrupt my day. So I've been pretty open that way. But there's been a lot of slander printed about me.
Oh, for sure.
And Wikipedia has called me a right-wing extremist. And, you know, Mark, I don't believe in the left or the right wing. I don't get into those dialectics.
Yeah.
So that's just pure baloney, what they're saying.
Really, they do like their labels. And I think that stands as confirmation that Wikipedia is absolutely controlled. It's not as independent as they would like you to believe it is. It's not as controlled by the public as they would like you to believe it is. I think there is an agenda at work there. And when they address people such as yourself, that becomes clear.
Well, it wasn't that I didn't try to correct the mistakes. When I first got out of being incarcerated, I tried a couple times to correct the mistakes, and Wikipedia wouldn't allow me to correct it. So then I hunted up someone who was a Christian who had been an editor for Wikipedia, and he tried, and he still couldn't. And he told me, he said, Fritz, I've been watching this for years. He said, they are prejudiced against people like you. They are biased, and they want to print bad things about you. So I got it straight from somebody who's worked with them for years, that they have an agenda.
Yeah, of course.
Well, there is one point that I would make while we're talking about trauma-based mind control and Wikipedia. Wikipedia said that I based my claims on trauma-based mind control on Kathy O'Brien. Where they came up with that bogus lie is absolutely staggering to me.
And solely on Kathy O'Brien, they say.
Yeah. I worked and met with hundreds of programmed multiple personalities before I met Kathy O'Brien. And so she was she was years down the road. You know, I had firmly established the whole thing long before before I met her, and I worked with the victims of this trauma-based mind control. I've worked with therapists all over, United States, Australia, the UK that deal with victims of this mind control. I've gone to conferences where there were like hundreds of therapists getting together that deal with this kind of stuff. So, and I've seen the abusers. I've seen the handlers. I've seen the programmers. I've seen the people that come around to pick up the slaves. I mean, I've seen it all. This is not something that's a theory, and I didn't base it on Kathy O'Brien. That is so ridiculous.
Yeah, there you go. Well, lots to get into, and I want to address the subject of your incarceration shortly as well, if that's okay with you, because it seems to me that you've really paid the price for the research that you've done and the great information you've put out there. Often people become targets when they put this stuff out there, and you certainly did. But in the meantime, we should probably start at the beginning. Could you just give us a bit of background on how you first came across this very sinister world of trauma-based mind control, and particularly MK Ultra? How did it all start for you?
Well, I began researching the Illuminati, and that's a story in itself. And then I did thousands of hours of research on the Illuminati, had written this massive tome, Be Wise as Serpents, and then at that point got in touch, met with 4 women that had been a team together in the Illuminati that wanted out of it. And a lot of things had happened in each of their lives that were allowing them to try to break free. And when I started working with them, and I was doing that for several reasons, but they started giving me the inside story. They couldn't talk a lot because the trauma-based mind control, they would go into suicide programming if they talked very much about these things. So, but it helped them to be able to talk to me because I already knew a lot. But in trying to help them, I had to deal with the mind control. And when I started dealing with the mind control on a day-by-day basis, I started seeing, the reactions of their handlers, the reactions of so much. I started seeing what did work and what didn't work in terms of the therapy and the deprogramming. And then after investing years of energy into Cisco Wheeler, we managed to get her free of her programming enough that her deeper parts, her deeper alters, that's deeper personalities, she had programming alters in there. In other words, she had been a programmer herself. And when we got those free, and they were really willing to work to help deprogram people and help me understand the deeper programming, boy, we were really making some deep progress there. And so the Deeper Insights book was done in conjunction with her deeper programming parts. And that took things to a whole new level. It was absolutely amazing to see her programming alters deal with victims of this trauma-based mind control. We had an open house policy that people from around the world can come to the house and get therapy. We didn't call it therapy. We were just, it wasn't formal therapy. We didn't charge any money or something. We were just like good friends that would help you with your programming issues. But she could look at someone who had been subjected to this trauma-based mind control, a programmed alter. She could tell you what personality was there, what the programming was running, everything that was going on at the moment just from looking at them, the little subtle clues that would go right by us. And so it was very informative being around her and watch her interact with this. Anyway, that's how I got involved, is I was trying to help people get out of the Illuminati.
Sure. Okay. Could you tell us a bit about what MK Ultra actually is, and also monarch programming and beta programming are methods or techniques, if you want to call them that we hear about as well. How do those two relate to the overall subject of MK Ultra?
Well, those are little specific names. There's this mind control has been secret since ancient times, but the Illuminati created different front organizations to do the programming, and one of their front organizations that was created was the CIA here in America.
Yeah. And
the CIA had a trauma-based mind control program, which was called MK Ultra. They've changed the name on it. And then one of the vernacular names was Monarch Programming, and that was based off of the concept that the monarch butterfly was one of their first scientific examples of how knowledge is passed from one generation to another. A monarch butterfly will pass to the next generation the directions for flying to as the monarch butterfly would like shift. Let's say that there would be a shift why they could pass on that new information. And that was very important for the programmers because they need the children that they program to be dissociative. And they discovered that the ability to dissociate and become a multiple personality is passed from one generation to another, which is why they have to keep this trauma-based mind control within dissociative bloodlines. And since the Illuminati have been traumatizing their kids, their own children, for thousands of years, of course, they're able to do it to their own bloodlines. But in modern times, it's been broadened out to the general population. And so that's part of the reason why we see so much traumatization of the general population, is they're trying to prepare the seed bed, so to speak, for the mind control that they want to do.
Okay. I heard you on a previous radio broadcast, Dark City Radio, just going into one example of the sort of techniques that are used to shatter a young child's mind and cause them to dissociate and go into these different altars. And I've got to be honest, it brought a tear to my eye. You know, I was welling up listening to it, because when you look at what is done with MK Ultra, it's one of the worst things a human being can do to another human being. Try and take control of their mind. And a question that a lot of people have when it comes to this subject is, who can be so evil as to do this? I mean, are we talking straight psychopaths? Are we talking Satanists that are so steeped in negative, dark energy that you know, they're just within the realm of all this stuff? Or are we talking handlers that have been programmed themselves to do this? You know, it just defies belief for a lot of people, and for myself, to be able to understand how anyone can do this to another human being, because we're talking about horrific things here, aren't we?
Yes, this hasn't come about overnight. You know, it goes back to the ancient times. In ancient times, thousands of years ago, of course, they had already become highly skilled in torture all throughout most of history. Even there in the United Kingdom, you know, there was, until fairly relatively recent times, if you said something, a bad joke about the king, you could end up on a pole, you know, dead. And so
lucky I wasn't born 200 years ago then.
Yeah, me too. So they were highly skilled in torture thousands of years ago. Of course, they had already discovered the use of drugs back then, magical potions. Even primitive peoples around the world are highly skilled in the use of drugs, that, the herbs and plants in their area. And so this was very well known. The Egyptians had dream temples. If you're a farmer, when it gets cold, and there's a blizzard blowing, the cattle turn their butts towards the wind, and they dissociate. You look at a herd of cattle in a blizzard, and they're dissociative. They're in a trance. Their faces look totally blank. So all these different elements, how to use deception and lies, how to use evil spirits, all of these elements were prevalent back there when the Egyptian priesthood developed the trauma-based mind control for the pharaohs and the mystery religions. So it hasn't come about it's been in use for thousands of years.
Right.
So these bloodlines that are doing this, they're psychopaths. Yeah. It's crazy people creating more crazy people. It's like you're saying, psychopaths creating another generation of psychopaths. And because they're multiple personalities, they can give themselves a good front personality that hides all the craziness. The Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde effect. And that's what these people are. They're Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hydes. And they hide the craziness underneath the front day-to-day personality. So you meet them and you think that they're a decent person. So that helps explain why, we're seeing all these front personalities that seem nice, but some of these nice people are purely sadistic in their deeper alters. Not only that, but even they've discovered that even if a person is not a multiple, just the normal person, if they're given instruction by an authority figure, that the normal person can be made to become sadistic. Oh, yeah. Experiments have shown that. So it's not as bizarre as we might think at first glance that there's people capable of torture. It always amazed me, how do these prisons find sadistic guards? How did all these kings find the person to torture people down in the torture dungeon?
Yeah.
Well, it seems like there's never been any shortage of people to step forward and play the saddest role.
Yeah, it's incredible, isn't it? And another thing that I found absolutely fantastic, in not in a good way, is this suggestion that some of the mind control handlers are actually inflicting the mind control on their own children, and that children are bred specifically to be subjects of this horrific act. It just defies belief and credibility for most people that any parent could do that to their own offspring, and yet that seems to be what's going ahead.
Yes, I have gotten to meet some of the, not that it was a necessarily pleasant experience, but I have met some of the fathers that I knew had programmed their daughters and had tortured them and done sadistic things and raped their children and so forth. And again, this goes back to they had it done to them, and they're multiples, and they have parts of their minds that are sadistic. A very important programmer in the 20th century was Joseph Mengele. And if you recall, he was in charge of the Nazi concentration camps. So this trauma-based mind control had been done for centuries on a non-scientific level. But you know how the Germans are very organized and are great with engineering and science. So the German part of the Illuminati were delegated the job of bringing this mind control onto a scientific basis. So that was one of the big reasons why the Nazis had the concentration camps, is those were used as a pool of human guinea pigs. And Joseph Mengele did a lot of trauma experiments on his guinea pigs. And some of those actually, after the war, became functional human robots for the Illuminati. They went their way. He went his way. They brought him to the Americas. They brought him here to the United States. In fact, a number of the people that I worked with had been programmed by him. They could describe to him, you know, like what his penis looked like, because they had to experience such things, and how he spoke, his German accent, and how he walked and his mannerisms. You know, I got to hear all of this. The guy traveled to Europe. We have pictures of him traveling to Europe. He had no fear. He knew he was protected by the powers that be. Yeah, you know, and so there's somebody that's publicly known. We know he sat there at the concentration camps, and he was the person that greeted people when they got off and would say right or left. You know, he determined your fate. And we know it's the records there of some of the crazy experiments he did, you know.
Yeah, it's truly horrific stuff. And for a lot of people, the nature of this is just so horrendous that they block it out. They just turn away from it or reject it by default action because it just sounds so incredible. But it seems to me that that's the kind of public reaction that the controllers are relying on in order to continue with their program unimpaired. And unfortunately, as we discover in many walks of life, the truth is often very inconvenient and very unsettling, but it's still the truth. And the first step towards ever being able to expose what's going on here and ever standing any chance of putting a stop to it is to at least acknowledge that it's going on, however uncomfortable that may be.
Wow, well said. I love the way you put that.
Well, that's the way it seems to me anyway. You know, I mean, it's unsettling for me to research this and to talk about it, but I accept that it's going on, and if there's any part that I can play, if I can participate in any way in raising awareness of it so that we stand some chance someday of eradicating it, then I think that's important to do. I'm pretty sure you'd agree, because you've played a very major part in bringing this to the public consciousness. But a lot of people just don't want to go there, do they?
No, I have always been totally engrossed in reality. I love history. I love reality. I don't read fiction. I don't like to watch movies that are fiction. I don't like to watch Hollywood movies because, you know, like let's say they're showing a film about World War II. They'll show the Hitler Youth in winter, in the middle of winter with summer uniforms, or firing guns that have magazines of only a few bullets, and then they have some incredible amount of bullets come out of them. That kind of stuff drives me nuts because I love reality. But in spite of my love for reality, this trauma-based mind control is so horrendous. You know, it was a challenge to me too. There was one incident, and I had taken Cisco to a safe house on the coast to do deprogramming, and we were working through a memory of trauma, and the trauma was so traumatic, it traumatized me to hear about it. And I was standing, and my whole body collapsed. I felt like melted butter, where I just collapsed into the rug. And I just couldn't stop bawling and crying for a day. I didn't even know a person could have that many tears. So it's not an easy subject to deal with, but that also gave me impetus that stimulated me, motivated me to do something about it, because I realized this thing is so horrific, and it's being done to our kids. Whole generations of kids are now being subjected to this trauma, that I had to do something.
Yeah. In what walks of life and areas of society are MKUltra mind-controlled slaves commonly used?
Well, surprisingly, the answer is going to surprise the listening audience. They actually salt them in totally throughout society in general. I picked up hitchhikers that were street people, and in getting to talk to them, realized this guy's a program multiple. They have them salted in throughout society at all levels. It's not just that they're in the mansions, or that they're in the military as super soldiers. But to give you an example, during the 1930s, the Nazi government was sending over to America. People were immigrating from Germany to America. There was a little town in upper New York where they were assembling some of these people. They were program multiples. They were people that had been subjected to this trauma-based mind control. And they just set them there. They just had these people come over, and they never used them. Now, during World War II, they landed saboteurs by submarine on a number of occasions, but they never used these people for sabotage or anything during the war. And I found out about it because years later, as their programming started to fall apart, they went into therapists, and then the therapist contacted me. So that's how, because I don't live in New York, obviously, I live on the West Coast, but that's how I ended up learning about these people. But they never used them for anything. They just left them there as sleepers. So we have some people that are programmed, and then they just allow them to be sleepers. A lot of people are that way. On the other hand, there's a certain small percentage of these people that are actually operational, and they watch them 24/7. There was somebody who was an insider that was against this stuff, and gave the information about how they monitor these people at the time. The time that I got the information was 1991. Here in the United States, there are 40,000, if I remember the figure correctly. There are 40,000 of them that they monitored constantly, But there were a lot more that could be used, but those were just the ones that they were constantly making sure that they were checked on round the clock.
So those kind of figures suggest that there's a constant flow, a constant supply of mind-controlled slaves. It must be like a production line, like a factory conveyor belt. They're just churning them out every year and putting them into society for who knows what means.
Oh, yeah. Large numbers. Incredible numbers. And I was able to expose in my books some of the main programming centers, the knots, China Lake there, which is near Death Valley. Here in Western United States, we have large areas, like Area 51, the area of Area 51, you might think, oh, well, that's something small. Talking off the top of my head, but but Area 51 is as large as some of our small states on the East Coast. They got enormous areas, and they're off limits to the public. And within these enormous areas, they have total secrecy, and they just have factories essentially where they bring these children in by the hundreds and cage them and split their minds into multiple personalities and lay the foundation. Once that foundational programming is in place, then they can do they can layer in the further programming on a local basis. But they have major programming centers in these top secret areas where they just, like you say, it's like a conveyor belt almost, where they're just turning out massive amounts. It's incredible, and it's all being done under the disguise of national security. Nobody's allowed to know what goes on in these places because of national security.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The world is very different to the glossy version of events that we get fed on the surface. The two areas where MK Ultra mind control or trauma-based mind control is most commonly thought of would be, I think, Manchurian Candidate style assassins, and a great example would be Mark Chapman, the guy that shot John Lennon, who exhibited all the signs of being mind controlled and on a mission. And also pop stars and movie stars. We hear so often now, and it's come up a lot in my research, that many of your favourite pop stars and possibly some of your favourite Hollywood actors are actually victims of this as well.
Oh, definitely. Anybody who's going to be in the public eye, the people that are controlling things want to make sure that anybody who's an icon who would have a voice to the public is controlled, so that they don't spill the beans about the controllers and what's going on, or say something that they wouldn't want said. So your movie stars, your iconic big rock stars, these big musicians, yeah, they're definitely victims of the mind control, and oftentimes not only victims but the perpetrators too. They'll have dual role. And I thought about, because you had mentioned the music industry as being one of your areas that you
sure,
enjoy learning about.
That's my specialist area. Yeah, I look into how this is used in the music biz.
And I thought, I was away for 8 years, and during that time I was away, people took my information and they've done incredible things with it. And on the internet, there's some incredible sites where they talk, where they have incredible videos, where they show these people doing the mind control things. You see the triggers, you see and all. I thought to myself, there's no way I can compare to these. I should just suggest that the listener go and look these things up on the internet, because there's a lot of information out there,
Oh yeah, for sure.
Look at someone like Britney Spears. Look at someone like Clive Davis. There's so many people out there, and it just the country Western music industry was created by the intelligence agencies and the Illuminati, and has been a hotbed for this trauma-based mind control. I've watched these country Western performers doing things, and right in front of people they just, if you understand the mind control, you just see, like Dolly Parton was out there on stage one time, and her handler came out, and she just turned around and she put her hand on his in submission, as a slave does, because I'd been taught by Cisco how the slave is to show submission. She does that, and she turns around and calls him daddy right there in front of millions of people on television. It's like if you understood the mind control and how it functions, you'd like go, whoa, they just did it right in front of us. This isn't even secret.
Hidden
It's
in
not
plain
really
sight.
even secret. That's why I suggest if people will get my books, the formula book you mentioned, and then its sequel, The Deeper Insights, and they read about this stuff, they're going to see it right in front of their faces.
Yeah.
It's not even really secret. Once you know how to recognize it, it's like they're right in front of you.
Well,
and
exactly.
then you can go to all of these sites that are taking the obvious and putting it up there on YouTube and so forth for you, so you can visually see for yourself how this is going on all around us.
Yeah. When it comes to the music industry, I think the name that most people would think of is Britney Spears, as you said. There's a classic video on YouTube, which I've referenced before, where she actually switches into one of her alters in the middle of an interview. It's a very well watched and very famous video as well. And of course there's a famous incident where she shaved her head and started attacking cars with umbrellas, and that shows all the classic signs of the programming breaking down and her having to go back into the lab and be reprogrammed. One that a lot of people are talking about right now is Miley Cyrus, who's just had a big #1 hit in the UK, daughter of Billy Ray Cyrus, of course, the country and western singer. She performed at the VMA Awards just the other day and was exhibiting some very abnormal behaviour, which again shows all the hallmarks of mind control. A classic hip-hop so-called artist is Nicki Minaj, who is just an A to Z of all the signs and indications of mind control. She switches alters in interviews, puts on different accents, becomes different personalities. She's even got an alter called Roman Zelensky, which she slips into spontaneously mid-interview. And then in Hollywood, there's the likes of Tom Cruise has always struck me as a strange character. In the middle
Yes.
in the middle of interviews, you'll see him switch and do some very strange things. So when it comes to the music industry and Hollywood movies, are there any other household names that keep cropping up when you look into these areas? Names that people are going to know?
Oh, across the board. The easiest way to say it is if they're famous and they're in the limelight, they have gotten there because the world order put them there.
Yeah.
Some of them don't even have talent. I mean, Paris Hilton, in my opinion, is neither pretty nor talented.
I don't actually know what she's even supposed to do. I don't even know what the cover story is with her.
But she's obviously Illuminati and programmed multiple. But if somebody gets up there like that, you can just, you can make a safe assumption that they're a programmed multiple. Another thing that they're using the music industry for is they use a lot of these songs like, and I used to listen to the radio, and when they needed to announce a ritual over the radio, you hear the song Heartache Tonight, or to reinforce the programming, like there's a song playing with the Queen of Hearts. The Queen of Hearts is the emergency Mayday system that's going to alert the programmer that the programming is being tampered with, because they build these systems with an altar, or actually several altars, that are watchdogs. They're just little child altars that don't know really anything but their role to play. And if anything happens to the programming, they contact the programmer, with a Mayday signal. And so, like, in that song playing with the Queen of Hearts, knowing that it really smarts, Joker's the only fool who'll do anything with you. That is reinforcing that programming of that. So you hear a lot of songs knocked 3 times. I can give an incident where one of the Illuminati ladies that I was trying to help, they have these guys that are assigned to pick these program multiples up, so that they can be so a new program can be put in, or so that they can check with the system, just like you would I guess bring your car in to get it serviced or something. So his name was Rex, and I've actually bumped into Rex a number of times. But Rex came by in his pickup truck, and he went to she was inside, and he went to the window and he knocked 3 times, and that's the signal to be picked up when the slave hears those 3 knocks. They're to go to the door.
The triggers.
And so, pardon me?
They're triggers, yeah?
Yeah, that's a trigger. And so he did that, and her son, who was familiar with my research, knew what those 3 knocks were, so he ran out to try to catch Rex, and Rex ran for his pickup truck, and David chased his pickup truck down the street. Well, the pickup truck got away, but what Rex did was he was so confident that those 3 knocks would bring the woman out to the street that he just circled around the block and came around expecting to pick her up. Anyway, the reason why I'm mentioning this is there's a famous song, "Knock 3 Times," right? Maybe you've heard that song.
Yep, another one, yep.
Yeah.
Isn't it Dawn? Is it by Dawn?
Yeah. So, these songs that you're hearing all the time, they have a dual role. They're not just songs, but they're reminding the slaves of their programming, or they're doing things to the slaves' mind control system. It's activating certain parts. So across the board, so yeah, if you're listening to music, know that music is being used. We're basically, the UK and the USA are mind control labs.
Yeah, really.
That's all we are.
Yeah, you got the Tavistock Institute in London, which is involved in this big time. Let me just ask you, we see a lot of mind control, or depictions of mind control, encoded into Hollywood movies and into music videos. They seem to like doing it. They seem to like letting you know what's going on and dressing it up as fiction, whereas in fact it's based on stuff that's really happening. I'm thinking of movies like the Bourne trilogy, the Bourne Ultimatum, the Bourne films, in which you've got Matt Damon playing a former CIA agent who is obviously having undergone some sort of mind control treatment. And to me, a lot of the things that are depicted in those films and dressed up as fiction are in fact, or do have some basis in fact. And then of course you've got The Manchurian Candidate, the famous movie from the 60s that was updated recently, and you've got all kinds of symbolism that's being put into music videos now. Nicki Minaj videos and Beyonce, Rihanna, Katy Perry, all the rest of them. They seem to like rubbing your nose in it. They seem to like letting you know what's going on in the sure knowledge that most people will not understand the significance of what they're seeing. Or I'm wondering if there's some other aspect of what's going on here, if it's like predictive programming, in they believe they can keep the program manifesting by presenting depictions of it into the public consciousness. But either way, they seem to like letting you know what they're doing via these methods, don't they? They
sure do. I have some ideas as to why they do it, and yet, the extent of how they get in our face showing it is mind-boggling to me. And when I wrote these, I wrote actually 3 books. We've talked about 2 of them. The other one's out of print. When I wrote these books on the mind control, I actually thought that I was going to scale back what they were doing. I exposed Alice in Wonderland, The Wizard of Oz, Star Wars, Star Trek. I exposed these programming themes and how they were doing things, and their programming, the actual codes. I have 40 pages of codes. What bothered me is years later, they were still using the same programming themes, the same codes. It's like it's like they were getting right back in my face and saying, you didn't do anything. We can just go ahead and do what we want.
Yeah.
And you really can't stop us.
Yeah.
And I don't know. That's kind of it's I don't know what the word to place on it, but I guess honestly it's disconcerting that they can just get in our face and
it seems
just
to be
do this
arrogance.
right.
It seems to be real arrogance on their part. It's like, yeah, okay, we know that some of you are onto us. We know that there's a few researchers out there that know what we're doing, but we know that the general public, the vast majority of people, will never see it, and so we're just rubbing your nose in it, and what are you going to do about it? That's the way it feels to me.
Yeah. It really does feel that way. Then there's different ideas, people that believe in God. There's something in the scriptures where Satan has to go before God and ask permission to tamper with Job's life. And so using those kind of incidences as a framework, people say that God insists that evil broadcast what they're going to do, that they don't have a free ticket just to go and do evil, but they have to tell you. That
Yes.
could be, for some reason they seem to, it's called revelation of the method. I thought for years that one of the reasons why they did revelation of the method was it's very intimidating to the slaves. Imagine if you were a mind-controlled slave and your handler or programmer could come to you and say, you think you can get free of us? Look, we're doing this right in front of everybody, and nobody's even doing anything.
We're even telling people what we're doing, and nobody's coming to help you.
Yeah, exactly. And that must be very intimidating to somebody who's trapped in this.
Well, whatever the case, they do seem to like to announce in advance what they plan to do with all of their activities, and it does raise a big question as to why they feel the need to do it.
And maybe part of it's just that psychopathic, sadistic personality gets enormous pleasure out of announcing what they're going to do.
Well, it could be. When it comes to mind-controlled slaves, just thinking specifically of music stars and Hollywood actors for a minute, they seem to like to get them as children, don't they? They seem to like to start the programming very young. Also, I've heard it suggested that females are easier to program than males. Is there any truth in that?
No truth in that. The ratio of people being programmed is about even between the sexes.
Right. They like to grab them young, don't they? They like to get them as children.
Oh, they do. And so the Mickey Mouse Club is one of the places where they place these program multiple children.
There you go.
In Disney as part of the programming apparatus.
Deeply sick, satanic organization.
Oh yeah, and you'll see these children in the Mickey Mouse Club. These stars that Disney when they start out, you'll notice as children they're like these really pure, wonderful children. They have that kind of an image, and then all of a sudden, when they get older, they flip into being sluts.
Yeah, they go from the Waltons to the Addams Family. Yeah, really. You've seen that with Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and any number of others when it comes to that. A very valid question that people often have when it comes to the suggestion that mind control subjects are selected from childhood and groomed from an early age is how the parents could allow this to happen. I've heard that many of the victims come from families that have government military connections, which suggests that the powers that be might have had their eye on these particular offspring as a result of the parents' profession, and that the programming may be happening against the parents' will, and that the children are effectively abducted. And then other theories suggest that the parents are maybe themselves mind-controlled victims, or maybe they're part of a Satanist cult or something. And then you've got another school of thought which suggests that the parents are simply paid huge sums of money to look the other way and allow their kids to be used. But either way, it's very difficult for other loving parents who would do anything to protect their kids to understand how other parents could allow their kids to become part of something as horrific as this. You know, what are the parents doing in these cases?
Well, you nailed the head. They're doing all of the things that you mentioned.
All of the above.
Yeah, all of the above. One thing that they tell people in the military is they'll tell them they'll lie. You know, I mean, they don't tell the whole truth. Obviously, they say we have these methods to make your child a genius. You know, and your child can help our government, you know, in many different ways. And would you turn your child over to us, to this project? So, and we'll make your child successful. And so the parent is lied to, and the parent doesn't really realize what they're subjecting their children to. I've seen that happen. And then I know of one particular case. It was a lady who, she was not Illuminati, but married someone who was Illuminati, and sincerely tried to stop what was going on, and was subjected to outright torture and deception. And anyway, they just put the full powers of what they had available to make sure that this parent could not protect the child. And the extent that they went to get around this parent shows that if they have to, they've got a lot of assets that they can bring to play, so that even if there is a parent that would catch on and try to object, they'll probably fail at stopping it.
Yeah, it seems some families, some individuals get selected for this, and they're just the unlucky ones that then have to kind of try and work it through. When you first came across Cisco Wheeler, and you've also worked with Kathy O'Brien, when you first came across these individuals and the stories that they had to tell, what were your first impressions of it?
Well, I was very fortunate that actually prior to meeting Cisco, I had met a number of other program multiples. She wasn't the first one I met.
Okay.
And when I met Cisco, I met her in the context of meeting her whole team that she had been teamed with. And so I was getting 4 people that were telling me the same story and whose evidence and stuff collaborated each other. That made it very easy for me to grasp what they were saying.
Sure.
If I had heard it from just one person, the tendency might have been to have disbelieved it because it's incredible stuff.
Yeah.
But 4 people who had experienced the same thing, who could validate each other, made it credible. And then once I started participating in Cisco's life, you know, she had one of her programmers come into the house, for instance, and was throwing around the programming codes. I mean, I got to see this kind of stuff firsthand. So after a while, it validated itself right in front of my eyes.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I would never put all my faith and confidence in any one particular author or researcher that is coming out with something that is so radically different to anything you've heard before. But when you get a number of researchers and authors, or, you know, former subjects from many different walks of life in many different cities or maybe different parts of the world, all coming with information that validates and corroborates each other, then you can conclude that there is some validity to it, and it's something that is worth taking seriously. You know, you can't dismiss it when you get the same kind of information coming from all these different sources, I feel.
Yeah, the earliest was The Control of Candy Jones, which I believe, if I remember right, her husband wrote. She was one of the early trauma-based mind control victims working with the USO program in World War II. But I came out with my work on the programming, and then you had Kathy O'Brien and Sue Ford follow with their books, and other people too. So that was fortunate for me that other people came along and told their stories. They presented the information in a different way. You know, Kathy O'Brien's story is just the personal account of what she went through, where mine is more like a Chilton's manual of how the programming's created and done. But yeah, I was happy to see other people totally unrelated to me coming forth and validating what's going on.
I feel this story wouldn't be complete without us addressing the subject of your incarceration, the heavy price that you've paid for the research areas that you've gone into. I mean, to me, it smacks of a classic stitch-up job, and I think anyone with half a brain looking at the flimsy evidence on which you were convicted would come to the same conclusion. If the Wikipedia account can be trusted, it states that on February 12, 2003, you were found guilty of 1 count of armed bank robbery and 1 count of aiding and abetting in the use of a semi-automatic rifle. Blah, blah, blah. As I say, it just looks like a classic stitch-up job. It defies belief that the US judicial system could be stretched so far as to get a conviction on the lack of evidence that was available. But would you just like to recap on what happened there and the grounds on which you were incarcerated for, I think it was 8 years, and what you feel was really going on?
Well, my attorney that went into court with me asked one of his buddies in federal law enforcement, what's this thing about Fritz Springmeier? And this guy who was retired from federal law enforcement said, yeah, we've been trying to put him in prison for years. So they had been trying for years to get something to stick.
Any charge will do.
Yeah. Whatever they could, that they could work up. So it had nothing to do with me being a criminal. It was that they had been trying to put me away out of circulation.
They wanted to make an example of you.
Well, the most amazing thing, well, there was a number of amazing things during this whole trial. But at one point, the jury, well, I have to kind of explain things for it to make sense to the listener, but in any crime, there's what's called elements. And that is like, let's say, making an analogy, what is a dog? You know, a dog, it has certain things that make it a dog that distinguish it from a cat, right? So each crime has certain criteria that have to be there for that crime to exist. Those are called elements of the crime. And so the judge had told the jury that the first crime that they were to consider was aiding and abetting armed bank robbery. But if they didn't find me guilty of that, then they could go to the lesser charge, which is aiding and abetting unarmed bank robbery. And in other words, it's just like if you commit murder, you know, first degree, second degree, manslaughter. There's different levels depending on the elements. Well, the jury actually found me not guilty of aiding and abetting armed bank robbery because there was no connection between me and someone else going into the bank and using a gun to rob it. So they didn't feel like they could convict me of that. So then they went into session and asked themselves, was I guilty of the lesser crime, aiding and abetting unarmed bank robbery? And they decided, you know, the government must have done something. There must be something here. The government wouldn't be going through all this trouble. I'm extrapolating on why they did that, because they knew, because my attorney had not presented any evidence. In fact, one of the jurors later told my wife that they convicted me because my attorney had never said anything about me and they didn't know anything about me. But anyway, they decided I must be guilty of something. So they came to the conclusion I was guilty of aiding and abetting unarmed bank robbery. Well, when they decided that, the judge told them, if you're gonna decide that, you have to find them guilty of the higher charge, which is aiding and abetting armed bank robbery. So the judge told them to find me guilty, which anybody who knows law knows that the judge is not to tell the jury to find the defendant guilty, Yeah. But in my case, that's what they did. And then they used that when they found me then when they followed the judge's orders and found me guilty of aiding and abetting armed bank robbery, why, then the judge gave me 5 more years statutory on a 924C. A 924C, if you read the law, it says that it can only be given to somebody if they actively use the gun that's used in a crime. Now, I was never even accused of that. They never accused me of being near the crime scene. They never accused me of using the gun. They know that the bank robber that confessed to the bank robbery used the gun. I mean, they even have the bank videos of him coming in with the gun. So they know I had nothing to do with the gun, and yet they still gave me a 924C, which can only be given if I was the person holding the gun. So I got 5 years for it.
Didn't the guy that was had the robbery pinned on him mention that he didn't know you and you had nothing to do with it? Didn't he actually say that?
Yeah, he did. But that doesn't make any difference.
And that stood for nothing.
That didn't make any difference. They said that they couldn't bring him into court. He was just up the road at a prison here in Oregon, but they made the claim that they couldn't transport him to testify, so therefore they couldn't use his testimony, which was just a lie. I mean, they could have brought him because they brought somebody somebody else all the way from California to testify against me. But, they selected who they wanted to testify. If it was somebody that was a criminal who they could bribe their testimony, okay, we'll use him. But if it's somebody that would exonerate me, they wouldn't let them into testify. So it was just all...
It's a fit up. It's a fit up from start to finish.
Oh, yeah. It was not a sincere, real trial. But, I didn't expect to get a real trial.
Yeah.
And I guess they were true to their colors, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. How did you get through that time, just knowing you'd done nothing wrong and knowing that you were paying this price for trying to bring some truth for the sake of humanity? You're trying to put some information out there that people need to know about, and what you've got for your trouble is 8 years of jail time for no reason. How did you get through that time?
Well, going to jail and prison, which aren't exactly the same thing, but being incarcerated definitely cramps a person's style. I mean, you're not going to get to do things like you want, but a person needs to, be in control of their life, take control of their time, and not allow the system to control you. The system, the prison system, tries to make you think that your life is in their hands, that you cannot make any decisions, and they try to do a real head trip. And right from the beginning, the first thing I told myself was I was not going to allow them to do that head trip to me, that I was going to stay in control of my life. This is a lesson that all of us can apply to our life, and that is, if you don't take control of your life and your time, then time in your life is going to take control of you and just beat you up. And that's what happens to a lot of inmates is they don't take control. Well, and then, I notice some of these big people, people that are big names that that are well known, they come to prison, but they don't have any character and they fall apart. Well, we have to, when we're in these kind of situations, we need to dig in and have some character and take control of our life and not let these things wig us out and where we fall apart. So I just took control of my life. It wasn't easy at the start. It was a little bit difficult, but I made a determination right at the start to continue being my good old self, not to change, not to let them do anything to me. And I stayed in touch constantly. Every day I was in touch with lots of people, phone calls, letters, and so forth. And, I just rose above the situation. In the end, it turned out to be a blessing. There were all kinds of blessings that happened. God had his hand on me, and a lot of blessings happened by being incarcerated. So I look back and see all the positives that happened.
We're just gonna wrap up now. So do you just want to recap for people on where they can get further information about your work? Any web addresses that people need to go to, and just a recap on your books and where people can get hold of those.
Okay, go to pentracks.com, pentracks.com. Pen like you write with a pen, tracks like the bunny rabbit leaves in the snow. Pentracks.com, and there you will see my books that are available. And there's 2 books on the mind control that are still available. The first one's The Illuminati Formula. It's got a longer title, which I won't repeat at the moment. And then its sequel, which is 600 pages, is Deeper Insights. These books are very, very important because, as you know, Mark, they break down in detail how the mind control is done, what the therapeutic issues are in regards to it, and how the help can come about.
Yeah.
It exposes the programmers, the programming centers, the programming codes, the whole everything from A to Z.
Just to clarify, can a mind-controlled slave be deprogrammed and effectively cured?
They can be deprogrammed and they can be helped, but the trauma is so severe. It's not like you're going to get somebody back to its original state, because there is no pure, pristine original state. I mean, remember, this was done to them when they were a child.
Yeah.
So it's like there isn't any pristine, original, healthy child there to get back.
Do they
damage from the start?
Do they always start when the subject is a child, or is the programming sometimes applied when they're already an adult?
They definitely have ways to do it to adults too, which is one of the reasons why they have these hypnosis clinics around in the UK and USA. Is they analyze people that come in to these hypnosis clinics to see if they're good candidates to take to program as adults.
Okay.
They also have some other methods that they're applying to adults too. Let's see. It seemed like I'm missing one of your questions that you asked earlier.
Well, no, it's just a couple of questions that just occurred to me there as an aside. You were telling me about your books, but it was just a couple of things that occurred to me as we went along there.
So yeah. Recapping everything, this is an important subject, because when you understand this mind control, it will allow you to understand how and why they're doing so much. people wonder how could they really have the power that people claim that they have. Well, this is how.
Yeah.
This is how they can do something and get away with it.
Yeah.
This is how they can have a false flag like the Boston Massacre and get away with it.
Yeah. And as we said before, the first step towards doing anything about it and stopping it in its tracks is accepting and understanding that it's going on. And from there come any possible solutions. But you have to accept it before you can do anything about it.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of situations that people will be in where knowing about this stuff will protect them. Otherwise, if we're not aware of all this stuff, it's real easy to get blindsided. And that goes for anybody.
Okay, Fritz, all the very best to you. Thanks for taking the time out with us today.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Mark, and the best to you. Thank you very much. And I worked with the victims of this trauma-based mind control. I've worked with therapists all over, United States, Australia, the UK that deal with victims of this mind control. I've gone to conferences where there were like hundreds of therapists getting together that deal with this kind of stuff. So, and I've seen the abusers. I've seen the handlers. I've seen the programmers. I've seen the people that come around to pick up the slaves. I mean, I've seen it all. This is not something that's a theory, and I didn't base it on Kathy O'Brien. That is so ridiculous.
Yeah, there you go. Well, lots to get into, and I want to address the subject of your incarceration shortly as well, if that's okay with you, because it seems to me that you've really paid the price for the research that you've done and the great information you've put out there. Often people become targets when they put this stuff out there, and you certainly did. But in the meantime, we should probably start at the beginning. Could you just give us a bit of background on how you first came across this very sinister world of trauma-based mind control, and particularly MK Ultra? How did it all start for you?
Well, I began researching the Illuminati, and that's a story in itself. And then I did thousands of hours of research on the Illuminati, had written this massive tome, Be Wise as Serpents, and then at that point got in touch, met with 4 women that had been a team together in the Illuminati that wanted out of it. And a lot of things had happened in each of their lives that were allowing them to try to break free. And when I started working with them, and I was doing that for several reasons, but they started giving me the inside story. They couldn't talk a lot because the trauma-based mind control, they would go into suicide programming if they talked very much about these things. So, but it helped them to be able to talk to me because I already knew a lot. But in trying to help them, I had to, I've been open as an author to people contacting me. Every day I have people contact me and interrupt my day. So I've been pretty open that way. But there's been a lot of slander printed about me.
Oh, for sure.
And Wikipedia has called me a right-wing extremist. And, Mark, I don't believe in the left or the right wing. I don't get into those dialectics.
Yeah.
So that's just pure baloney, what they're saying.
Really, they do like their labels. And I think that stands as confirmation that Wikipedia is absolutely controlled. It's not as independent as they would like you to believe it is. It's not as controlled by the public as they would like you to believe it is. I think there is an agenda at work there. And when they address people such as yourself, that becomes clear.
Well, it wasn't that I didn't try to correct the mistakes. When I first got out of being incarcerated, I tried a couple times to correct the mistakes, and Wikipedia wouldn't allow me to correct it. So then I hunted up someone who was a Christian who had been an editor for Wikipedia, and he tried, and he still couldn't. And he told me He said, Fritz, I've been watching this for years. He said, they are prejudiced against people like you. They are biased, and they want to print bad things about you. So I got it straight from somebody who's worked with them for years that they have an agenda.
Yeah, of course.
Well, there is one point that I would make while we're talking about trauma-based mind control and Wikipedia. Wikipedia said that I based my claims on trauma-based mind control on Kathy O'Brien. Where they came up with that bogus lie is absolutely staggering to me.
And solely on Kathy O'Brien, they say.
Yeah. I worked and met with hundreds of programmed multiple personalities before I met Kathy O'Brien. And so she was she was years down the road. I had firmly established the whole thing long before I met her, and deal with the mind control. And when I started dealing with the mind control on a day-by-day basis, I started seeing, the reactions of their handlers, the reactions of so much. I started seeing what did work and what didn't work in terms of the therapy and the deprogramming. And then after investing years of energy into Cisco Wheeler, we managed to get her free of her programming enough that her deeper parts, her deeper alters, that's deeper personalities, she had programming alters in there. In other words, she had been a programmer herself. And when we got those free, and they were really willing to work to help deprogram people and help me understand the deeper programming, boy, we were really making some deep progress there. And so the Deeper Insights book was done in conjunction with her deeper programming parts. And that took things to a whole new level. It was absolutely amazing to see her programming alters deal with victims of this trauma-based mind control. We had an open house policy that people from around the world can come to the house and get therapy. We didn't call it therapy. We were just, it wasn't formal therapy. We didn't charge any money or something. We were just like good friends that would help you with your programming issues. But she could look at someone who had been subjected to this trauma-based mind control, a programmed alter. She could tell you what personality was there, what the programming was running, everything that was going on at the moment just from looking at them, the little subtle clues that would go right by us. And so it was very informative being around her and watch her interact with this. Anyway, that's how I got involved, is I was trying to help people get out of the Illuminati.
Sure. Okay. So welcome to another installment of Good Vibrations. It's one that promises to be quite fascinating. It's one that I've been looking forward to personally a lot, because it's a subject area that I really want to get into, and it's a subject area that I've addressed a couple of times in some of my own talks and some of my own radio appearances. So very excited today to be chatting to Mr. Fritz Springmeier. How you doing, Fritz?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Great to have you on. Now, of course, you're the author of a very important book, which I've referenced a few times, and many other people have. The Illuminati Formula, used to create an undetectable total mind-controlled slave, which you wrote in conjunction with Cisco Wheeler. You've also written other books, including Bloodlines of the Illuminati, Deeper Insights into the Illuminati Formula. So what we're going to be talking about today is basically the very sinister and ugly and nasty world of mind control, trauma-based mind control, and specifically MK Ultra. So first off, people that might want to find out a bit about you, should they go to your Wikipedia entry? I noticed that it's far from complimentary. It kind of reeks of bias and ulterior motive. You're described as a conspiracy theorist. And then we have the strategic use of words such as claims and conjecture. And it seems the authorities and the establishment don't really like you very much.
Well, the Wikipedia article is full of distortions and outright lies. And one of their sources that they've gone to is they used yellow journalism articles as their substantiation. In other words, some news reporter comes along, fabricates a story, and because it gets put into print, it then is referenced as an authority about me.
There you go.
So, yeah, going to Wikipedia is an effort in futility if you want to learn about me. You can, the listeners are welcome to go to my website, pentracks.com. That's pentracks.com, pentracks.com. And I have a bio there. I've been pretty open about my life. And
tell us a bit about what MK Ultra actually is, and also monarch programming and beta programming are methods or techniques, if you want to call them that we hear about as well. How do those two relate to the overall subject of MK Ultra?
Well, those are little specific names. There's this mind control has been secret since ancient times, but the Illuminati created different front organizations to do the programming. And one of their front organizations that was created was the CIA here in America.
Yeah. And
the CIA had a trauma-based mind control program, which was called MK Ultra. They've changed the name on it. And then one of the vernacular names was Monarch Programming. And that was based off of the concept that the monarch butterfly was one of their first scientific examples of how knowledge is passed from one generation to another. A monarch butterfly will pass to the next generation the directions for flying to as the monarch butterfly would like shift. Let's say that there would be a shift why they could pass on that new information. And that was very important for the programmers because they need the children that they program to be dissociative. And they discovered that the ability to dissociate and become a multiple personality is passed from one generation to another, which is why they have to keep this trauma-based mind control within dissociative bloodlines. And since the Illuminati have been traumatizing their own children for thousands of years, of course, they're able to do it to their own bloodlines. But in modern times,